You're watching Points of Interest.
And Traherne inserts himself into everything. He's everywhere. Hi guys, welcome back to Points of Interest. We've been gone for a while. Some of us were jaunting off to Boston and freezing half to death. So it was a good time.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Good show.
Yeah, so thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us. I am here today with Scott McGough and Bobby Stein. So two of my more fun guests. Thank you guys for joining. Scott is the narrative designer for Heart of Thorns, and I will let you describe what that is, because the best you explained to me was ladies want to see me and fellas want to be
me. Yep.
Fellas want to be me.
I'm the narrative designer for Heart of Thorns, so 2 years ago we started working on what the story would be in the jungle region and how it would tie into the jungle region itself. There's been a lot of people who have helped me along the way and people who have made major contributions, but I've been the sort of milestone guy who's been there for since the very beginning.
And Bobby is the lead writer and the boss of us.
Yeah, I just pretty much help whatever teams are doing stuff in production. I usually get in and help them from the pre-production phase all the way through ship usually. So I go where I'm needed and I try not to get in the way too much.
That last thing is kind of a lie, isn't it?
I always try and get
Well,
in
he
the way.
tries.
Yeah.
He tries to get in the way?
No, he tries not to get in the way.
Oh, okay. He tries.
Doesn't
Does
always
it
work out.
succeed? Okay,
Yeah.
There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit today about, we're going to talk a lot today about storytelling in Heart of Thorns and how we're making that work in game. So we have a couple of cool player things first. I was super excited about the two things that got brought to our attention this week. First of all, check this out, you guys.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
This came from, actually, Teddy here in the studio brought this to my attention. This is from one of our French fans. She is a tattoo artist, so I'm thinking that she designed this herself. This is Casimir's staff and Jory's knife intertwined that Leslie has tattooed on her forearm, which kind of makes my forearm hurt. I'm not sure. It seems like it's one of the more painful places. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I'm looking at Bobby because he has a tattoo. And
as someone who knows what it feels like to get Guild Wars tattoos.
do you have a Guild Wars tattoo, Bobby?
I do.
Thank you.
Show it.
Okay, do you feel better now?
Show it.
It's under the shirt.
Okay.
I love the concept of this, beyond it being very beautiful. I like the idea of merging Casimir and Marjorie's weapons the same way they're a couple, and together they're greater than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, and that's beautiful work.
It is super, super sweet. So, all right, let's peek at the next one really, really quickly, because this is amazingly terrifying and gorgeous. This is from Anata. I hope I don't butcher your name, and I'm very sorry. I think it's Anata Cosplay. Her title on this was "Follow Me into Battle," and she was like, "But seriously, if I wanted to fight a battle, this makeup would make me miss it." It took her over an hour just to get the face makeup on. And she's curious, I wonder if the designers ever actually tried to put this makeup on themselves. So this is the primitive armor skin. The staff is a packed quarter staff with glowing eye holes, and she named it Franklin.
Nice.
So, Franklin the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that she made the eye holes glow. So I'm always really impressed with good cosplay, just
Yeah.
because I've seen how much work goes into these. The really good ones are like 6-7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's solid. That's thanks for the nightmare fuel. That's great.
It's,
I mean that
good
seriously.
nightmare. Yeah, it's good nightmare fuel.
It's a good look.
Yeah, super impressed. And we do have one more thing that we don't have a picture of, but that's okay because it's equally important. I was chatting with a fan in game the other day, and he asked me for something kind of special, and I am kind of hoping that Dan and Kat are watching. He messaged me in game about his fiance Kat, and Kat is due to deliver their second baby any time now, and is incredibly uncomfortable. Bobby, you've got kids, so I'm sure their mom, you remember how much fun that was there in those last few days.
Yeah. Good
But
times.
it is her birthday, so she asked me if I would tell Kat happy birthday, just to make her feel a little bit better, from Dan and their son Leland and the baby bump. So happy birthday, Kat, and hang in there. Apparently not too much longer, so you'll get there.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Kat. All right, so let's talk about story. And you guys are much better at this than me, so
Okay.
let's start with just kind of talking about the maps, because we had talked about the maps and how much denser they are as far as replayability on a previous episode. And we talked about the actual map design before, and story kind of weaves into that.
Absolutely.
So I'll
Yeah.
let you guys kind of elaborate on how that is.
Yeah, and the jungle region, the region itself was one of the main starting points we had. We knew we wanted to tell the story in the jungle region, and so that kind of helped us zero in on the kind of story we would tell and how it would play out. The maps in the Heart of Thorns, we've made a serious point of the story instances and the open world content are very tightly connected thematically. So as you've seen in the PAX demo, in the first story mission, you're helping Larenthier and the rest of the pack troops get their act back together after being destroyed by Morgemoth. In the open world, when you leave that story instance, there's more of that to do. It's much more extensive. There's different places you can go, different groups of pack soldiers who need your help. They all need different kinds of help. But the idea is the player has arrived to take charge as the commander and is picking up the pieces of the wrecked packed fleet. And you'll see that in the story mission. You'll see that reflected in the open world. It's all very tied together thematically, and so it feels like the same unified experience.
So it's not just you've got this static backdrop and then your player character's running around and the two don't really have anything. It could just be happening anywhere.
Right, yeah. In this case, the event that started all this was Morgemoth wrecking the fleet. And that event impacts everything that happens in that initial map. When you first enter the Heart of Thorns, the jungle region, you will be in this map where the fleet wreckage is most prevalent. Things are still on fire. There are wyverns flying through the air. They're taking down helicopters that are crashing around you. And you'll see that this impacts what happens in the story mission and how things play out. Pact soldiers' attitude towards you, the commander, towards Larenthier, their commanding officer, who was in charge when they were taken down. All these things matter in the story instance, and they matter in the open world content as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we did in the core game was there was a bit of a separation between the personal story and the open world stuff. And while you may need to go to certain open world areas to get into an instance, they really didn't intersect that much. And in expansion, we definitely want to have it feel more like it's a connected story that's not only taking place in the story instance, but also kind of carries out into the open world. So you'll see characters who are in the story instance that are also out in the open world. We played around a little bit with this concept in Living World Season 2, to where you might actually have to do things in the open world that tied into the story thematically. So I think this is an evolution of that. We're pretty excited.
And yeah, for the first time in a story instance that's not in Living World, you are going to see story characters who have a role to play in the story instance. And then as you play through the map and get deeper into the content, further into the jungle region, you'll see that character over and over again, and their story evolves, and you'll see them at different stages in their arc. And I want to pick up on something Bobby said. We are definitely building on the lessons we learned in the first 2 seasons of Living World. Not just the story that we started telling in the first 2 seasons of Living World, which began with Scarlet and moved on up through the Zephyrite ship crash and the Master of Peace and Glint's Egg and all that other good stuff that led us to the fleet destruction. In addition to that story, we're also building on some of the concepts we learned and perfected in the Living World and applying them to the story instances and the open world in Heart of Thorns. We can talk about content density, how there's replayability built into the story missions themselves. So you're going to have choices to make in story missions. Whether you, for example, do you choose to trust Larenthier since he's a Sylvari and Sylvari are now suspect given that they have their origins in the Jungle Dragon? Or do you not trust Larenthier and do you relieve him of command? When you make that decision, the choice has an immediate payoff within the same story instance. We found this this helps replayability. This helps players get more into the idea of what's happening in the story mission matters. If you trust Larenthier, you have one set of content. If you don't trust Larenthier, you have another set of content. And that's effectively doubles the amount of playtime you have in these story instances and encourages players to go back and replay them without having to start over and re-rolling a fresh character from the very start.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that was like a verbal example of the map because there's like so much there.
Yep.
Ow. Okay. So you were talking about like season 1, season 2, how we learned from what we were doing. Let's start there because there's like a whole lot there that I want to talk about. This is a lot like our map. The whole map doesn't look enormous, like you're not running across fields for days and days and days, but there's still a ton there, which also I want to talk about, so I'm going to slow down.
Well,
okay.
and let me start with, I believe you've talked about this in a previous points of interest, but yeah, the map density, there are layers of content in each of the maps in the jungle region, starting from the very heights of the jungle canopy all the way down to the subfloor beneath the ground.
Oh gosh, I want you guys to see the subfloor so bad.
There's things to do on each of these layers. There's things that push you from one layer to another. We encourage exploration. And with the new mastery system, you can and will explore things you couldn't explore before. So these maps, while they may be smaller in surface area, they're much denser in terms of the amount of content that we're putting in each square foot.
So much stuff in there. Yeah,
And
as
then
far
in
as
terms of the lessons learned from Living World, as Living World went into story instances and back out of story instances, the connection between the content got stronger and stronger. And we wanted to maximize that and build on it to make sure that everything you do in the Heart of Thorns is connected for a unified experience as a player.
yeah, I mean, we were with like season 1. I mean, we were doing something new and trying different things, and we were kind of learning as we went. You just made a forum post about the personal story, and that was kind of a good example of learning and continuing to make it better as we went.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, in response to that, we had done a live update last year that had changed some of the details about the personal story, and from reading what fans were saying, we took a look at it and we said, yeah, what we did not have the desired effect. We can do better than this. So we took a closer look at it and we said, okay, you know what? Not only are we going to restore it back to the way that it was in terms of how it the narrative flow, but let's make it better. Let's do things that whether it was lessons that we learned from seasons 1 and 2, but also if you think about it, a lot of the people who worked on the core game had also worked on seasons 1 and 2, and they've gotten more experienced and they know how to build stronger content. And when given the chance, we can actually go back and take what's there and actually kind of apply that. So a lot of the content that either was deactivated for a lot of people is coming back, but also some of the presentation has been upgraded in a way. We were working with the cinematics team, the audio team. We basically have gone in and overhauled a lot of elements of it. Little things here and there. I mean, I want to be pretty honest with expectations so that people aren't expecting a completely brand new thing. And we took what was there and tried to make it better in spots. And we've rewritten and re-recorded dialogue. We tried to be a little bit clearer about certain things, or if we knew from experience before that certain things didn't work as we wanted them to, we wanted to go in and try and remedy that. And actually, some of the changes went all the way back to Living World seasons, things that had happened after launch. So, for example, if you were doing your personal story after Lion's Arch had gotten cratered by Scarlet, you would go into a story instance which technically takes place in a timeline that is previous to what the open world is in. But you would see that instance as if it was current. And that creates a bit of a disconnect. So what we've actually done is, for certain story instances, we've actually restored the artwork in there. So now, for example, if you want to, if you're on your personal story and your instance entry point is in Lion's Arch, for example, you will actually see the old version of Lion's Arch in there and not the one that is currently there.
So you could go into old Lion's Arch depending on who your mentor is.
Yes.
And maybe see Tybalt.
Sure.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, so those are the kind of things that we, one of the many things that we've talked about. A lot of the information's in the post, but there's other things that I haven't mentioned because I would like there to be at least a little bit of a surprise for people, I wasn't expecting that change, and now that I saw it, well, I'm sure people will let us know.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we're all very distracted by the fact that Scott's beard is brushing his microphone.
You get used to it.
It's a thing. All right, so that's kind of an interesting tidbit. I was kind of excited about getting to tell that about Lion's Arch and getting to go back and forth in there. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about replayability and just getting to go in there. And it's not just grinding the same thing over and over, right?
It's not, no. The point of replayability in the story instances is to give you new content to experience each time you go through it. So as I mentioned before, there are branching choices in some story missions where you're going to make a very clear distinction between going one way or the other, and the impact of that choice will come back almost immediately. There are areas you can't reach in the story instances and in the open world, where unless you have, say, your glider mastery built up, you can't reach these areas. But when you do, there's more content to be found there. We're putting in the story instances special hard mode achievements, where if you accomplish certain things under certain difficult conditions, you're going to get extra achievement points for doing it. We set out to make it as replayable as possible, to incent people to go back and try it with different characters. In this case, in particular, for the jungle region, you're probably going to want to go back and play through as a Sylvari, because there's special tidbits and treats just for the Sylvari race. Being this close to their creator, things are different for Sylvari than they are for other playable races. And specifically because the Sylvari have turns, or some of them have in the packed fleet, there's some suspicion. There are Sylvari characters who are no longer trusted by their fellow soldiers. There's going to be NPCs who react negatively to the player's presence as a Sylvari. Canach, one of our Canach characters, is featured, and he is going to have a lot to say about the treatment of Sylvari and how being in the jungle this close to Mordremoth affects him, and what his outlook and output is on that. So in order to, we put stuff in there so you'll experience new things. If you change the way you're playing, the story instance will have different content for you to play. Okay,
so I'm super interested in Canach myself, and we talked a little bit about him. The three of us have chatted about him before. Bobby's like, yes!
Mm-hmm. I'm very proud of Canach. I was on the original team that introduced Canach way back in the Lost Shores of November 2012.
Thank you for that.
I've had at least some input on Canach's character and dialogue in every appearance he's made so far. It was very important to me that we have this kind of character in the mix, this sort of morally gray character who's dissatisfied with his lot in life, and that dissatisfaction has led him to make some bad choices. We've seen how those bad choices play out, and we've seen him address the impact, the consequences of those bad choices head on. So the space Canach occupies right now is he's fresh out of prison. He's working for Countess Anise on kind of a work release program from Lion's Arch, which is called Buying Your Billet. Countess Anise is paid for Canach to leave jail and serve her until his sentence is paid. And as such,
She's having way too much fun with that, by the way.
She is. And
it's delightful.
And that was the one pairing, I think that was a group effort, but we decided to put Canach with Countess Anise just because as many scenes as we can write where those two characters interact, the better. The stuff that was in the party instance in the One Living World release, which Peter Fries had a large hand in writing, was just a joy to watch Canach, the sullen, very proud mercenary, having to stand there and hobnob with Divinity's Reach nobles while Anise taunted him. It was just a very rich vein of character to explore. And I liked where we ended up as a conclusion. Canach finally got some measure of equality with Countess Anise because he saw through her illusions, and she said, you've passed the test. You're the kind of guy I want working for me. So from that point forward, Canach has been working on behalf of Countess Anise. Another one of my favorite Canach moments that I can talk about because I had nothing to do with it, but in that initial the arid sandcastle map, Silver Wastes, when you first come across the Mordrim corpse, I believe it's a husk that has a mine in it, a mine attached to it, and the mine goes off, and the player character says, "Who would mine a Mordrim corpse?" And Canach steps in and says, "I did." And that's the kind of guy we want in the mix. This is a no-nonsense, take-action kind of guy. And he creates some friction between himself and the other members of Destiny's Edge, through the other members of the player's party. That's Bram and Rox and Marjorie and Casimir, simply because he is a Sylvari and there is some measure of Sylvari distrust, but also because he is so proud and he's kind of prickly. So he's not the kind of get-along character who makes everybody happy, as I would perhaps describe Taimi, who also has some rough edges, but she's so darn cute. Canach's not quite as cute as Taimi, but for that reason I love him more.
But yeah, he's great just because he's so rough and completely, he doesn't care if you like him or not. He's got stuff to do. Yeah, Canach is one of my favorites. Taimi is absolutely my favorite. So, love her. All right, so we're moving forward. This is kind of where we've been, where we're going. Moving forward, stuff is kind of getting darker, and that's a thing that Bobby and I had talked about. Everything's not going to be pretty and happy. It turns out we're at war. Surprise!
Yeah, the tone is going to be a little bit different.
And we're going to go down that road a lot more. We've seen some serious darkness already. We saw the death of Belinda. We saw the destruction of Fort Salma. We saw the destruction of the Pact Fleet. We've seen people we've seen most other non-Sylvari turn against Sylvari for their connection to Mordremoth. We've seen Kaith commit the unspeakable murder that she was literally unable to speak of for decades. It's a dark place, and Mordremoth, hits you where you live, especially if you're a Sylvari. He has this ability to influence your thoughts. He puts thoughts in your head that seem like your own, and you have to have the willpower, the protection of the pale tree, the presence of mind to resist it, because it's very difficult. If you, the example I use is Sylvari have a wild hunt, which is sort of this instinctual need to do something. Nightmare courtiers have the dark hunt, which is this instinctual, primal need to do something. They don't really think about it. It's pre-conscious. It's not rational, and that's where Mordremoth gets to you. You don't realize you're thinking these thoughts until you articulate them, and by then it's too late. And so Mordremoth has taken a very personal role as an antagonist. He's affecting our characters in a very personal way. Marjorie has a strong personal beef against the Mordrim for killing her sister. The Sylvari have a strong personal beef against Mordremoth because he is undermining their ability to interact with other races in Tyria, and literally undermining their very personalities. You can an unprotected Sylvari who gets too close to Mordremoth's influence is going to turn.
I have this whole Heart of Thorns, this time it's personal thing going on. So way back when, and I'm not sure how many, I've seen a couple people still talking about this. You know, Mordremoth's making it personal. Zaitan, we had turned Zaitan around. You and I had talked about this before. We had talked about way back when that the Elder Dragons don't really care. It's just a force of nature. And that was kind of a shorthand thing, but we've elaborated on that.
Yeah,
since.
that's kind of
I
a shorthand thumbnail description of the Elder Dragons. They're more like a force of nature than a mustache-twirling villain who says, "Yeah, ha ha, I will tie you to the railroad tracks until you pay the rent."
But please picture that for a minute.
But it's not, when we say they're a force of nature, we don't mean they're literally like a hurricane or like an earthquake. Because as we saw in the core game, Zaitan reacted to what the player did. When you succeeded in the first step of the invasion of Or, Zaitan roars in frustration. When you attack his eyes and his mouth, Zaitan reacts. The characters, the NPCs, like the eye and the mouth, who speak for Zaitan. Zaitan wants this, Zaitan commands you to do that. There is a little bit of give and take between the dragon and its minions. There's not a lot of monologuing. We're not going to see a monologue from Zaitan. We're probably not going to see a monologue from Mordremoth. But the idea, Zaitan would raise your dead relatives and then you'd have to kill them again. That's the very traditional zombie trope of your friend or family is no longer your friend and family, now they're a monster.
Zaitan's a jerk.
We've taken that a step further where now they don't have to die to have you ask that question. Is that Sylvari trustworthy? What has Mordremoth done to that Sylvari's mind? And at that point, you have to make some tough choices in the real world in real time about what you're going to do with these characters you know. And in addition to affecting Sylvari, this also affects non-Sylvari, because Mordremoth has put the thought in your head, wait a minute, these Sylvari aren't trustworthy. So what do you, as a character in the game, as a role-playing player of the game, how do you respond to this new Sylvari distrust that is present in many NPCs? And I think it's justifiable. You don't know by looking at them if a Sylvari is under Mordremoth's influence or not. In Aaron's case and in Scarlet's case, they didn't know they were under Mordremoth's influence. So it's a huge question mark, and it's designed to make all players uncomfortable and add a little bit of tension to the story as it unfolds.
I feel like role-playing is going to be intense.
Yes.
Okay, so Scott had caught himself earlier. He was like, you know, Destiny said, well, okay, so the players group, and we've talked about making the character more central to the player character more central to the story. How are you guys, how are you working that?
Yeah, originally, well, yeah, this is a potentially really big subject, so I'll have to choose my words carefully.
Go nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, not too nuts.
Yeah.
I have other things to do
yeah,
today. I don't want to go home at some point.
In the core game, the player obviously had a role in driving the story. In season 1 and into season 2, we were realizing that people definitely wanted that sense of kind of driving things forward and not always being just given orders, right? Being more active in the story. One of the limitations that we actually had at the time was, player voice and things like that. That is something that we developed kind of behind the scenes and we've addressed. So the great thing about, so season 2, we started having the player more of a shot caller and kind of having a little crew that they would go around and do things with. So into the expansion, obviously, the player is kind of taking charge of a situation that's currently kind of falling apart.
And if I can interrupt you for just a second, that's very much on purpose. When you first enter into the jungle region, it's a war zone. There's a wrecked Pact fleet that's still burning, and you are the Pact commander. The whole point of that story instance, the whole point of that maps theme is that someone needs to step in and take charge, and we made sure that it is the player who's doing that.
Yeah, totally. So that's really the moment where the player just, not to say that there's a power vacuum, but really it's just things are falling apart, and the player is the natural choice to come in there and take charge and make decisions. And
Would you say that we're the boss? Sorry.
You could say that.
You could say that, yeah.
You'd be in good company if you called the player the boss.
Yeah.
I'd be in all the company, really.
Yeah.
And the presumption going into the Heart of Thorns is that the player is the commander of the pact. And so you do outrank just about every other officer who's present. And so you're in a position to take charge. And we, like I said, we made sure that you do.
Yeah. And there are even some cases where the player is interacting with other people who maybe aren't members of the pact, where some of that dynamic might actually come into play a little bit. And it's like, well, I don't take orders from you. Well,
You're gonna.
You do now.
yeah. So,
I have the pointy thing.
yeah, and just, kind of getting into that is just, having the story feel very active, not necessarily having to stop and do a lot of talking. Not that there's plenty of talking in the game, hopefully at the right spots where things are really moving along.
I interrupted you, and I'm going to bring it back to where we were.
You can interrupt me again.
Yeah, so I brought you off track. I'm going to put you back on track. It's,
Count on you.
His
the
chair is
player-
on wheels if you want to just kind of...
The player being able to speak is something that we were able to restore for Heart of Thorns. We had that ability in the core version of the game. We didn't have it for Season 1 and Season 2 of Living World, and now we've brought it back. And that gives the player a lot more agency. It gives the player a lot more presence in terms of what's going on. The player is still a shot caller, but the player can now also have conversations that advance the plot, that flesh out the lore of the world we're in, that explain the situation. And the new technology we have that lets the player talk also lets different playable races speak different lines.
You guys can call each other boss. Okay, sorry.
Yep,
I'll stop.
The Char player character will say a line differently than the Solari player character, who will say it differently from an Asura player character. And that lets us create more of an actual character for the playable character that people are role-playing. And the return of that technology opened all sorts of new doors, because now not only can the player talk again, but the player can talk in the open world, on the run. There's virtually no limitations to where we can have the player contribute to what's going on verbally.
Yeah, and just the other day I was actually looking at some of the events that we had in that map, and previously in the game a character might say, hey, we need your help over here. The player can actually respond to that, and they can actually have a bit of a conversation leading into an event starting. So it feels a lot more natural. It feels way cooler. So we're really excited, and I know a lot of people put a lot of hard work and effort into getting that tech online. So now it's kind of up to us and everybody else connected to it, the actors and the designer, the art team. Everybody's just kind of pulling together to make sure that, if we have a consistent tone and we have a really cohesive story that's going to propel the character through all of this, that we're really trying to deliver on something that we've wanted to do for a long time, and now we're actually able to.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Really, really appreciate you guys coming and hanging out and telling us story things. So we got to hear a couple of kind of new little hints for Heart of Thorns.
Anytime. I hope to be back soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you guys very much. And we will be back with you in PvP 101 in just a couple minutes. Welcome back, Hugh.
How's it going?
It's about to go a lot better because you're going to help me with my warrior.
Yeah.
And other people too, so.
I'm really excited about this one. So last time we talked about an actual map. Talked about Forest Niflhel, and we're just kind of going over like a quick overview of it, as well as like some of the little side areas and whatnot, just terminology and all those things.
I found myself a lot less lost.
Good.
So thank you.
Perfect.
I appreciated that greatly.
So now we're going to actually go in and create a build. So a lot of we talked about like the UI, and we've done a lot of things, but we've never actually created a build using the help of like Meta Battle, or actually creating one by hand. Today we're going to be using Meta Battle. But yeah, so we're going to actually create the build. This is actually a build I use. We're starting with Warrior, which is the one I know the best. So I think it's going to be easy for me to kind of show you guys exactly what to look for, as well as using Meta Battle as a good tool. So we're going to show you how to navigate Meta Battle, how to create a build, and then how to use the build, set up the build, and then obviously we've already shown you guys how to go into a map, both in practice and unranked, and then using that actual build. So let's go ahead and switch over quickly to Meta Battle. So you can see by just going to metabattle.com, over here is Ranked Arena. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And we're going to start with a build that I've been using pretty regularly, which is called Warrior Shout Bow. So I'm going to click on this right here, and it's going to bring up the build. Now the first thing you want to do is kind of look to see what you got. So it's showing right here my first weapon set, my second weapon set, healing, utilities, and elites. And you can see this one with the question marks optional. So I'll kind of get into that in a second. So we're going to be using a sword, Warhorn. We're going to be using a longbow as our second. We're going to be using healing signet. For great justice, shake it off, the optional, and then battle standard. And so over here, which I love, is they actually have, I'm going to zoom this in just a little bit for you guys. It actually has the variations right here on the slot, so skill variations. So it says you can use like Fear Me if you need some an unblockable AoE CC, On My Mark for another shout that's a little bit lower cooldown, Balanced Stance if you need to get some of that stability, Endure Pain if you're going against a lot of power classes. So this is kind of like you feel this out. Ideally, I'll show you what I run when we get in there. But then it obviously has the elite skills and lets you know like what you can do. Ideally, you want to be using battle standard, but you have the options of the other ones, and it kind of gives you like, hey, if you're going to use these things, this is what you're going to get. So let's go ahead and go down a little bit further. So as you can see right here, it gives you this trait setup for you, really nice and easy. And if you highlight over all this stuff, which I love about Metal Battle, it kind of lets you know about all these things. So we're entering Cleansing Ire, Dog and March, Lung Capacity, Quickening Breaths, Vigorous Shouts, Destruction of the Empowered, Inspiring Shouts. And now once I get in-game, I'll kind of show you what these things actually give you, but just kind of letting you know what the website gives you. And then it says there's a couple things that you can do to kind of switch up your build here with some trait variations. And then it goes over weapons here at the next thing. Here it actually gives you what sigils you're going to be putting in your weapon. So it says to put in Battle and Intelligence on your first weapon set, which is your sword, and then your second Warhorn. This doesn't really matter which one you put in which slot, because they'll both be triggering as long as you're on those weapon sets. And then your second thing, which is Longbow, it says Geomancy and Doom. Okay, and now runes, which is the last part of the build, you need the Rune of the Soldier, and then it says to run the Celestial Amulet. And this is actually what I love, and I encourage you guys to come here and read this, and I'm going to be going over most of this when I'm actually in game here in a second. But this is actually how to use the build, and it gives you a nice overview of all the things that you should be looking for, which is great. So if you're having problems fighting this build, if you're having problems or you want to learn this build, this is a great place and a great tool, because this kind of gives you everything you need to know. This is a big wall of text, but honestly, when we get into this, I'll show you a lot of the things in-game which will make it easier. All right, so I'm going to let you guys, this is something you're just kind of like your homework for this. Come here and read this as well as watch this video for stuff that I'm going to be showing you. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to the game.
Okay, who does Meta Battle? Let's kind of catch people up on this who are new.
So this is actually builds made by the community, and they update it with the community and go over these things. So you'll see, like, next week there may be a new build on there that someone uses in a PvP match, or someone puts up there. Next time when we go to, we can go lower, and it actually has like good builds, meta builds, which is the one we just used, and then it's like in progress builds. So people are like, hey, this build's really good. I'm going to put it up on the website, and then let people try it out and give me feedback on my build.
Let people judge it mercilessly.
Exactly. But the good thing is you'll see some builds up there where you're like, wow, that actually sounds really fun. I'm going to try that build. And then give them some feedback. And you'll be like, well, I feel like it needs this, and you tweak it a little bit, and then kind of add to that whole page, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and build. So actually I'm running Hambo right now, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the build. So I'm going to go up at the top of the UI here, hit PvP build, and then I have a hammer and a longbow. So the first thing we're going to do is put the weapons on. So I'm going to click the little left click here. I'm going to go ahead and attach a sword. So I'm going to use my new sword here, my shadow sword. I'm going to click offhand, and I'm going to go ahead and put a Warhorn. And I have a longbow already slotted, so I don't need to do that. And I just kind of go right down the list. So let's go ahead and use, so it said to use Battle and Intelligence. I personally like to run, in this slot, I actually run the dodge one. But we're going to go with the meta battle build, and we're going to go Battle Intelligence, Doom, and Geo. So Battle is every time you weapon swap, you get 2 stacks of might, which is really good because one of the things we're going to be getting in the trait line is the ability to weapon swap faster. So you'll be able to get this pretty much on cooldown. Intelligence makes the next 3 attacks always crit when you weapon swap. So these are 2 weapon swaps. So essentially, every time I weapon swap in a sword, I get some more damage, and I get 3 guaranteed crits. Then Doom gives me, every time I weapon swap, I get poison on my next attack. And then Geo, every time I weapon swap into this, I will do a little AoE at my feet that will apply 3 bleeds to enemies for 10 seconds. Really, really good. Okay? Kind of all these are weapon swaps, so it's really making you go with those. And then in here, it said to take soldier, so I'm going to go over here to the search bar and just put soldier. I'm just going to click that. And then over here, instead of soldiers, I'm going to put celestial. So this is done now. This page is ready to go, but there's one more little tab here, which is traits.
Nice.
So I'm going to go ahead and refund the traits, and I'm going to put my traits in. And let's go over what we get here.
I don't think the easy ability to refund traits is ever going to get old for me. It feels so good every time.
So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take Dog and March. So Dog and March is great because anytime I get any kind of movement impairing abilities, I'm going to get regen and I'm going to reduce that duration. So it's going to make me able to stick on people easier and I'm not going to get CC'd as hard. Soft CC. Just cripples, immobilizes, things like that. The next thing we're going to do is Cleansing Iron. This is the bread and butter of this build. Essentially, this is you're going to be getting a lot of condies. You're going to be running on points and supporting your allies. This makes it so every time you use a burst skill, which would be like Flurry and ideally Combustive Shot, you'll cleanse 1 condi for every single adrenaline you spend. Bar. So there's 3. I can essentially maximum clear 3 conditions, 2 conditions, or 1 condition, depending on how many bars of adrenaline I have. Next. Oh, I'm sorry. We got a couple minors here, but nothing too crazy. You get a health when you have adrenaline, and you have a little bit more armor when you go up there. But I really want to talk about this, which is the big one. Shouts heal. With this, every shout I have equipped will heal for 2,208. That's AoE, 5 targets. I'm healing all my allies for this. Really, really good. Next thing, Quickening Breaths. Every time I use a Warhorn skill, I'll actually convert a boon into a condition. That's for allies as well. Over here, we're going to have Lung Capacity, reduce my cooldown on my shouts. Here we can do Destruction of the Empowered. I actually like to do the dodge roll over here, Reckless Dodge. But for meta battle build, I think it used Destruction of the Empowered here. And the last thing is Inspiring Shouts, which makes it every time I use a shout, I get adrenaline. So you can see it all kind of combos together really well. I'm getting adrenaline, I'm spending adrenaline to heal my conditions, put damage, put pressure, as well as I'm healing and shouting, and I'm yelling at everybody, but everybody's loving it. They're getting boots, they're getting
okay
life.
with being screamed at.
Yeah, they love it. So the other thing I forgot to mention real quick is, let's talk about some shouts. For Great Justice, gives me healing, gives me adrenaline, and gives everybody some fury, which is really important, 20% crit chance, and some power. Then I have Shake It Off, which will cleanse a couple condies, as well as break stun for me, give me adrenaline and heal. And the last one here, this is the optional, so you can go the shout, which is unblockable. So someone's trying to block you like a guardian or something like that, you can actually blow through their blocks, fear them, and heal and do all the other things.
Which is incredibly gratifying, I found.
Yes.
Nope.
Yep. So here we go. So I'm going to take On Your Mark, which is a lower cooldown shout, so I can use it more often, and it'll put 10 stacks of bone to give me some more damage. One thing I forgot to mention, actually, is on this rune, the thing here is whenever you use a shout, it removes a condi from an affected ally. So my shouts now not only heal, remove condies on one of them, but now all of them remove condies from everybody around me. So this is just like a really big, kind of tanky, kind of hybrid damage as well as support, huge support. But let's talk about one last thing. Well, before I start walking over to the section, which is the banner. This thing is amazing. Not only does it drop and give everybody fury and might, but it also reses players. It will, if someone's in the down state, you can res in like 5 players instantly with that skill. So in PvP, it's huge. It's just a great skill to use, and it changes the entire battle. If you use it really efficiently, you can res, 2 or 3 people and change that whole fight in an instant. So let's go ahead and talk about the build. So let's go ahead. I'm going to use a couple shouts here and give myself some adrenaline. So we're going to use this. So you can see I have some adrenaline here. I'm going to go ahead and attack. So the biggest thing you're going to use here is your auto attack is going to give you some bleeds and as well as a cripple. So I'm going to be able to stack some bleeds up here as well as kind of stick on people with the auto attack. This 2 skill is a leap finisher as well as a cripple. So again, another way to kind of stick on players. This is your big damage, your final thrust. When you weapon swap into them, you get that intelligence sigil proc. This is the big damage. It'll hit everybody, and if the foe's below 50% life, it will do even more damage. So you want to use this as like your finisher, as well as when you weapon swap, you get the 100% crit chance. Boom, right to face, really, really strong. Also has 3 targets, so if you can get a good amount of people in an area, really, really good. And these are your shouts. These are your Warhorn skills. So these will convert a condition into a boon, and it'll also remove, for this shout specifically, will give you swiftness, pretty much on 100% uptime. As you can see, it's 13 seconds of swiftness and 12-second cooldown. Really good. And then last, you have call to arms, which the biggest thing you need to know about this is vigor. The weakness is really important when you're fighting someone to give everybody that weakness, as well as it's a blast finisher. So I can talk a little bit about the bow, but the biggest thing you want to do here is pin down. Pin down is like your skill. If you can hit a pin down, you can win a fight easily, as well as call it out when you're hitting people. If you're in voiceovers, pin down's really, really strong. And then you have arcing arrow, which is another blast finisher. But the biggest thing, combustor shot not only cleanses your condies, but it puts a fire field down. So one thing you'll see I like to do is I'll get myself up to maximum adrenaline. I'll drop down a fire field.
Okay.
I'll use the 3 skill for burst, so I'm stacking might on myself. I'll weapon swap, use the 5 skill for another blast, jump in the fire field to give myself a fire aura. So I'm constantly kind of like doing all these little self combos for myself. And when I have the intelligence sigil, I can easily just get a nice final thrust, and all that combos really, really easily. But here's another thing that's you can do a little bit higher level is because when you weapon swap into longbow, sword warhorn, there we go, you get the intelligence proc, which means the next 3 hits, no matter what they are going to crit. So one thing that's actually really interesting you can do is you can do like this, and then shoot arcing arrow, and then weapon swap, and then it'll crit automatically, and you get 3 immediate crits right back to back because it's the arcing arrow still in the air when you weapon swap.
So if you move quick enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get a lot of things. So this is it, guys. This is really it. It's on paper. It's fairly simple. Big things to look for, obviously, is you want to land pin down. It has a little bit of a wind up, so you want to pin them down, and then you can kind of go to town on them. Keeping the constant uptime of poison is really good against healing classes, as well as when you're weapon swapping. You're always trying to cleanse condies and use your shouts. Try to keep might stacking with the ability to use combustive shot, arcing arrow, and the 5 on the warhorn. You're able to keep up a fairly good amount of might on yourself, as well as for great justice, which gives you the might and fury. This build is really good for supporting your allies. It's really good in team fights. It's really good 1v1. It's a meta battle. It's very, very strong. Very, very strong. So I encourage you guys to go to the meta battle page, read up on it, practice it. Combos are really simple. Use, monitor your buffs, monitor your condies, look at your allies, look at your buffs on your allies and whatnot. I mean, it's really good. I don't know. I really enjoy use Healing Sig. And so I didn't talk about the heal as much, but yes, Healing Signet is super good on this build because you're using so many other skills. The last thing you want to do is kind of interrupt yourself with a heal, and obviously Healing Signet's really strong as well. So, but that's pretty much it, guys.
I ended up putting you on my monitor over here, just so I'm like staring at this game. Okay. All right, so what is the best way to do it? Just jump in and start?
Set up the build, come up with their goals, practice a little bit, use a couple of shouts, kind of get the feel of the build a little bit more, right? Drop a couple fire fields, practice doing some combos in them, right? And then go into a match and say like, hey guys, I'm gonna go mid with everybody and just really monitor. This is like, it's funny because this is kind of like that hybrid damage. As soon as you start stacking a bunch of might, you become a damage class. Without it, you're not super, super damaging, you're more support. But with the banner, the shouts, and then being able to stack might for all your allies, you become kind of like a mid-range damage type with a bunch of support. So monitor the health bar on this side. You're going to see your allies, and you're going to see a bunch of condies and their life go down. Utilize those shouts really well. Like the floor for it's really high. It can be as high as you want. You can be really like, for me, you can be really selfish and be like, I'm only going to look at my health and really give myself and cleanse my condies. But when you get to that next level, you can be like, oh, that guy's got a poison that's going to last 20 seconds. I'm going to run over and use a warhorn skill on him to remove that, give him some swiftness so we can get to the next point, right? That floor kind of raises the more you play it.
Well, and I think while you're learning, probably being selfish is the thing to do.
Yeah.
And I mean,
start simple, yourself first, right? Utilize the skills. Make sure you're playing efficiently. Watch the other player. Try to land pin down. Try to land final thrust. Try to make sure you're always kind of keeping your condies off and managing your might. From there, then you can take that next level and be like, okay, I'm going to really make sure when I go in this fight, this person doesn't die because they're my damage, and I'm going to try to keep them alive, right? And then utilizing, I said, banner is really important. So like knowing that you don't have any stability in this build. So when you start using the banner, it's like a 2-second, 3-second channel. You got to be very careful, kind of leave the fight a little bit and drop it, and then get back in the fight and heal that person up, right? Yeah. that is what makes Hambo, or I'm sorry, this is what makes Shalpo really, really fun.
I think you're conditioned to say Hambo.
I love Hambo. I'm sorry, that's my favorite build. But this is honestly, I've been playing this a lot, and I've really been enjoying how much support I can give, as well as being able to fight solo at a 1v1 thing long enough to either get someone to come help me or to win that fight by utilizing my cooldowns efficiently.
Yeah. And keep in mind, that's who PvP 101 is for, those PvE players who
Yeah.
are just dipping your toes in the water of the PvP side of the game. So it's okay to be a little bit selfish, and you're going to
Yeah.
screw up and you're going to get your butt kicked
Yep.
for a while, and it's okay. You're allowed.
Play the build, it's a little tanky, and it gives you a little bit of everything you need.
Yeah.
So
thank you very, very much.
Oh, no problem, guys.
All right, so is this my homework, is to go
Yeah.
get smacked around?
Yeah, go pick a.
I'm good at that.
Put on Shalpo, and what we can do is next time if you have any feedback or anything like that, let me know how it went. Be like, hey, Hugh, I was getting CC'd a lot, and what is there I can do for this, or well, I didn't feel efficient in this part, and then we can talk about those things for next time.
Part of my feedback's going to be it hurt.
I know.
It always is. It hurts so bad.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we will see you in 2 weeks on Points of Interest.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
That ended well.